Viewers, as we are online live to the rest of the world from Tel Aviv. So this is now the Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs panel, in which we will discuss specifically the security and dual technologies as solutions for climate crisis, climate change. What's more relevant than this? We'll start with you, Shai Cohen. You'll be the, let's call it, chairperson of this session. You're a special envoy for defense and cyber exports and cooperation in the Israeli foreign minister. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yaakov. We are very pleased to be here today and to be able to present our goals as for the climate changes that we have chosen as a leading subject for our panel. So over the past few years, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has started to play a more significant role in promoting defense and cyber cooperation and exports. This is my position, which is a new position in the ministry, in order to enhance that and to work together with Ministry of Defense, other entities, but especially also with the Israeli industrial, defense industrial and security industrial milieu. We chose to discuss the needs and opportunities encompassing the Israeli technological field in general and in the defense and security industry in particular for dealing with emergency situations and disasters that stem from climate changes. The world's endeavors towards climate innovation, PLANETech, allocates Israel in a very challenging position. My colleagues Gideon and Tamar will later elaborate more specifically, drilling down into what is climate change, what it means, and also what are the technological possible solutions that we can talk about. But I would like to know that while climate changes have become global and crucial, and as they create emergency situations around the world, we at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have decided to prioritize this issue, and that is in the framework of our foreign relations and its goals for the next years to come. One of the ways to contribute to world efforts is managing climate change's negative influences. Negative influences, for instance, floods, fires, desertification, drought, etc. I'm not talking about the prevention of the climate changes, the emission of carbon dioxide and all that. This is another issue. We want to focus today on the solutions that the Israeli technological and industrial milieu can provide worldwide in how to prevent or maybe dealing better with the emergencies where they occur and when they happen. The disastrous outcomes are what's important for this panel to discuss. I want to note also that in Israel, the defense industrial community invests around 10% in the big ones, maybe even more, 12%, less in the smaller industries, in R&D, research and development. That means that we have billions of dollars only in the defense industrial community invested in R&D. R&D, I mean advanced technological solutions for everything. But even if we take a simple issue like drones, which is very strong in the Israeli defense community, and you take for account the fire in Jerusalem a couple of months ago, where drones of the big industry Elbit took part in monitoring the fires and thus assisting the fire personnel to take care of the fires before advancing to the populated areas or populated communities. That was the first time that such defense technology, so-called, like drones, was used for dealing with climate emergency situation. So this is my contribution. I would be glad to elaborate further on, if you like, on how we do and how we cooperate.
Yes, we will. Thank you very much. To my right, Ambassador Gideon Behar, Special Envoy for Climate Change. I'm not sure many Israelis know that there is such an envoy, so tell us about it.
Thank you very much, Yaakov. Indeed, this is a position that exists at the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs already for 4 years. I'm responsible for climate change and sustainability within the ministry for the last 2 years. And I must tell you that, in my opinion, this is the most fascinating post at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I think that it is one of the most important one internationally today. There are similar people doing the same job like me in other countries in the world. Everyone knows Kerry, Special Envoy for Climate Change of America, but there are similar also in Russia, China, Germany, the European Union and others. And my responsibility is to inject the aspects of climate change and sustainability into the foreign policy of the State of Israel, but also to bring into Israel what's going on in the outside world, and to tell them and to tell us, guys, look, climate change is becoming a huge issue. Climate change is also a possibility. Climate change is a huge possibility for Israel, for our export, for our economy, etc. And this is what we can do. Now, when we are talking about iHLS, or Homeland Security and security in general, believe me, there is a direct connection between climate change and security. Because climate change is considered a threat multiplier in the world. It multiplies, it strengthens already existing security situation. It strengthens the risks that exist, and the connection is there. And I truly think that Israel has a lot to offer to the world in terms of practical solution, because what the world wants today is practical solutions to the climate change. And the world is short of practical solutions. And this small state, the State of Israel, has immense variety of solutions in every way possible that we think about. And also, in the context of this conference of cyber or homeland security, there is a lot to do, and believe me, the more the situation deteriorates, sorry to say that, the more there are options or opportunities. But the opportunities also come in the field of prevention, in the field of detection, in the field of forecasting the future, but also in the field of managing a crisis with artificial intelligence, with other methods, with drones, like what was Shai referring before. So I do believe that Israeli companies and startups can really benefit a lot in this field, and there are huge opportunities that are making themselves available and present by the day. Every day that we speak, there are more and more Israeli companies in the field, and more possibilities, so I'll stop here.
Yeah, we'll talk about the technologies a bit later. Dr. Tamar Moise, PLANETech, right? Israel Innovation Institute. Tell us about it.
Okay, so first of all, thank you. Thank you, Yaakov. Thank you, panel members. Thank you, everybody who's here. It's a pleasure to be here and participate. I head the climate programs at PLANETech. PLANETech is an innovation community. We bring together stakeholders of various types, entrepreneurs, startups, investors, corporates, government bodies. Basically, together we act in order to accelerate development and implementation of climate technologies. And I'd just like to give a little background on what climate technologies really are. So when we're talking about climate tech, we're talking about all those technologies that can help in mitigation, in reducing emission of greenhouse gas emissions from every aspect of our daily life. And also, I was spoken about here, also technologies that can help us adapt to climate change. And adaptation is both short-term and long-term. It can be acute for extreme weather events. It can also be long-term in seasonal changes, different night and day temperatures that can affect the food supply chain. So there's also technologies to build resilience, both to communities, supply chains, infrastructure, and obviously on a national level as well. Regarding what we have as far as the Israeli climate tech scene, as Ambassador Behar noted, we have a thriving innovation system in Israel, also for climate techs. At PLANETech, we have recently mapped the Israeli climate tech system, ecosystem, together with the Israel Innovation Authority, a government body. Basically, we mapped it according to climate challenges, the same challenges for which we need solutions. These cover the area of the built environment, but not just energy and transport, which we know so well as climate technologies, but really looking at everything on our everyday life. Materials that we make, what they're made from, how they're recycled, manufacturing processes, drying filtrations. There's so many ways in which emissions can be reduced. So we look at 4 challenge areas: the built area, manufacturing, obviously looking at nature, how we can conserve nature, how we can preserve nature, how nature can be a carbon sink. And we basically mapped the ecosystem to see where the Israeli companies, where we are with our tech. And as was said here, we have over 600 startup and growth companies that are focused and targeting climate challenges. They make up, they're growing in number. They comprise, in 2020, 10% of all the founding startups that were founded in that year. So as was said here, we have a thriving community. It's built on technologies, which we have here, partly our challenges. Look at the challenges. We don't look for technologies, because technologies such as AI, sensors, and many more that we can talk about, some of them that come from the defense industry, can answer and give a response to many of these climate challenges. So that's sort of what we do at PLANETech, is share knowledge, bring together, connect, have pilot programs, implementation in order to accelerate the growth of Israeli startups and the ecosystem in the whole.
Great. Now, can you give me some examples of real technologies, practical technologies that can be used in order to tackle this climate change? It's a huge thing. Can you, do you have in mind, Ambassador, any technologies that you know of that Israel can specifically help?
In general speaking, in climate change, there are hundreds of examples, if not thousands of technologies, which are already on the table. I just have read or seen a film by a company called iHLS that releases or plans to release balloons into the air in order to sequester carbon and bring it down to Earth. There are many other companies like dealing in the field of energy storage, like Ogwind, which store energy in compressed air. They use solar energy, for instance, during daytime in order to press air and put it, store it underground, and then in nighttime release it and to produce energy. Another one is EcoWave, which produces energy from seaways, or Electron, which is electric rod, and there are really many fascinating things. I just seen today another company which I wasn't aware of, Groundwork, which produces fungi in order to ameliorate the farming, and by that way that you ameliorate farming and you ameliorate the ground can sequester much more carbon. And this is a potential, because we live in a world that will consider carbon capture as a kind of currency very soon. And there is a very large world mechanism of carbon trading and carbon credits, and this is currency, this worth money. So companies that will be able to sequester, to capture carbon and store it and show it to the world, they have another benefit. So, for instance, if you are a farmer and in addition to growing avocados, you may show that your Grove has already sequestered that and that tons of CO2, you will earn more. But also in the field of what we are talking about, of homeland security, there is a lot to do. And most of the technologies are already there. They are just simple homeland security technologies that can be adapted to the new situations.
So let's understand how. You said before that climate change is related to homeland security. In what way?
Well, if you see what's going on in the world, the number of climate-induced disasters is on the rise dramatically. We know it, we see it in graphs, we can measure it, and we know, and it keeps going up. There are more disasters related to climate and weather, like flooding, like fires, sandstorms, storms, heat waves, drought, etc. All of this creates extra pressure on security, security for countries, securities for municipalities, security for states or for regions, and they need to address it. They must have more tools in order to deal with it. So Shai, my colleague, has mentioned before the use of drones in order to control fires, but you can do it also in order to control floods, or you can use other technologies to detect and forecast floodings and prevent them. So indeed, there are many possibilities here.
Yeah, Shai, you wanted to say something?
I would like to give maybe two examples. Radars, which are used normally for aviation, but in Israel, the defense industries are developing ELTA, for instance, the IAI, but others as well. Very capable radars. Radars today can be diverted to monitor weather changes, climate changes. Another example is we have assisted recently a company that wants to export its merchandise to Europe in order to be able to, in advance, alert cellular phones of relevant people on a disaster that is about to arrive. For example, if you have a flooding in Germany, we had a few examples of devastating floodings a few months ago. The alerts to the cellular phones of the relevant people, not only the inhabitants, but also the security forces, might be very crucial for being able to manage the emergency situation. But I want to say something also generally speaking. Well, Gideon maybe insinuated to that before, and that is that today climate change's influences, i.e. The disasters that we're talking about, have or are becoming actually national security issues. Today, nation states have to deal with a flooding or a fire or storms in the same way or not, or even stronger than it deals with a war or battles on the borderline. And many of the Israeli defense technologies are relevant also for that. We have only to think positively and constructively of how to introduce those or adapt those into the needs that stem from the climate changes.
Mm. So, Tamar, we all saw Prime Minister Bennett on the stage at Glasgow, actually, almost promising the world that Israel will save the day with its technologies. So are we really that advanced and leaders in this field?
So first of all, I would say that we definitely are leaders as far as the skill sets, the capability, and I think part of what we're doing at PLANETech is also amplifying the existing system. And again, I think we are seeing this increasing growth year on year, going from 2% of all startup companies in 2014, 10% today. So we have an existing community which we want to amplify, and definitely there's all the skill sets here that we wish to take and help people do this pivot. And I think that was what was spoken about here, was taking technologies which are, say, used for a specific application, or taking capabilities and skill sets and pivoting them to a different use in order to answer a climate challenge. And I'd also like to give sort of a few more examples of speaking here about drones and image recognition. So with regard to aid mobilization, which was already discussed, another few words, and then I'll go on to a few other sort of concepts and climate challenges. So for aid mobilization, as was discussed, we have Israeli companies, Tamar that are sending out their own radars. Again, radars, as was mentioned, radars are particularly good for precipitation, and they have a weather forecasting system, a near-time weather forecasting system, which has already helped around the globe. So this is already Israeli tech helping globally. Predictions around hurricanes on the East Coast in the States, and really helping by having high resolution, near-time and real-time forecasting. You can know what is happening, you know who to alert, you know how to alert, you know where to put your resources, because you can't put your flood barriers over all the area, and they have very high resolution through the technologies that they've developed. So this is sort of one example of near real-time weather prediction. Again, everything we know about unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, mini drones, these can all be used also for Earth observations, not just for acute extreme weather events, but also to look at remote areas, to look at forestry, to see we're talking about forestry being one of the promising efforts for sequestration. We want to preserve our rainforests. We can't access many of them. So using drones and imagery is a way to follow, see what is happening, to make observations on land area, to make observations over the oceans. The oceans is another climate challenge. How do we have a sustainable blue economy? We're talking about aerial vehicles, but we also have, I think, coming out of the defense industry, we have aquatic unmanned vehicles and robotics. These are technologies that can support and can help wind turbines that are being set off onshore and need unmanned help. So there are so many aspects where the technology can be brought in. Another aspect, also talking about resilience, and this is relating to the food supply chain, is the whole field which Israel is a world leader. You spoke about being a world leader. We are a world leader in precision agriculture. And in precision agriculture, companies are using a variety of imaging techniques, sensors, data analysis, image analysis, to reduce the inputs that we put into growing whatever crop it is. Those inputs all have a carbon footprint. To increase the yields, which means for the same inputs we're getting far more food, increasing food security. And by doing so, we're reducing the land footprint. We're preserving our forests and making sure we don't have expansion of land. And these are technologies, both the imaging, both the unmanned vehicles, the satellites, that have come straight out, amongst others, also from the defense industry. So yes, we're a leader in precision agriculture. We are a leader in alternative proteins. We know that livestock and animal-based proteins are a big source of emissions, both from fermentation, from the manure. As a climate challenge, the challenge is how can we feed the world nutritiously with proteins without such excessive emissions? As part of the report that I mentioned before that we did with the Israeli Innovation Authority, we actually used an Israeli company who works with AI, looking at data from all over the world, trying to pick out and analyze what are the leading fields that Israel is already a leader in, one of them being precision agriculture, another one being cultured meat. Israel is a world leader in cultivated meat. This is lab-grown meat, together with other dairy products and other lab-grown products, but specifically in cellular meat. So this is as a replacement, if and when and hopefully and shortly will be scaled up and could be used as an alternative to livestock. So this is definitely, Israel is leading. And of course, also with regard to the effects of drought, which was mentioned before, Israel is a world leader in irrigation and desalination. And I think desalination is a wonderful example of some of the clashes that can sometimes happen and why we need even more innovation between reducing emissions and adaptation. We know that the world is suffering from water shortage, desalination, which is only going to get worse with the climate crisis. By desalination, we can increase the supply of water to people all around the world. So this is amazing. At the same time, it also uses a lot of energy. So we need the technological developments to continue to have more innovation, that we should use renewables, and also to have, as we said, challenges of processes and manufacturing so the process itself can be less energy intensive. So yes, these are some of the fields in which Israel is already a
So
leader.
maybe Israel will save the world. Mr. Ambassador, as you well know, at the Foreign Ministry, there's politics, always. And my question to you is, with all these great technologies, will politics prevent us from getting there in a quicker way? And I'm talking about international politics, and I'm talking about the disappointment from the climate summit in Scotland.
I think that this is not connected to politics. I think that this is basically an issue of economy, possibilities, and opportunities. And I think that this is the way that we have to look at it. And I want to touch upon another aspect that we didn't touch before, and this is the opportunities that are being opened now in a very wide way for the defense industry. In two ways. One, everything, every operating machinery, platform, etc., will have to adapt itself to new conditions. For instance, choppers, helicopters must be able to fly also when the air is very hot and they cannot cover a great distance. Infrastructure, military or defense infrastructure has to adapt itself to rising sea level waters, to floods, to heat waves, etc. So this is an opportunity for the defense industry. Another opportunity is mitigation of the defense ministries, because armies and militaries in the world are decarbonizing today. Militaries have a great responsibility for the emissions of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. So the militaries of the future will have to be also emissions-free militaries, and we can see it already in NATO. NATO has decided that climate change is a core issue, a strategic issue of the alliance, and they have adapted a strategy for climate change, and based on 4 pillars. One of them indeed is the adaptation of militaries, military equipment, even if you want uniforms that the soldiers wear, adaptation to severe weather conditions that affect the health of the soldiers, etc. And so there is a huge opportunity for defense industry, and I do believe that the defense industry in Israel must go in that direction, because this is a huge market now opening. And the second one is defense equipment, which is emissions-free. This is also one of the pillars in the Alliance strategic plans.
Yeah, Shai.
I want to reinforce Gideon's last point, and to say that we have started working actually with the Ministry of Defense here in order to adapt to the climate changes, also the defense exportations, defense and security exportations. Also, I would like to know that we at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we cover over 160 states with diplomatic relations through our 108 diplomatic missions. The goal of the climate changes in general, and also subsections in particular, is going to be one of the major goals for our foreign policy in the next year, but also in the next years to come, I believe. And for us, it's very important to note that the ability of the Israeli Foreign Service, together with professional organizations like PLANETech and others. This conference, for instance, is very important for this sake, the IHLS, INNOTECH IHLS conference. It's an opportunity to raise on the table those issues, Climate change has become maybe the most important issue that the world is dealing with today, its applications. And so we have to adapt ourselves also in terms of diplomacy, and that is very important.
Mm-hmm. Gideon, can you name a few countries that Israel is in close cooperation with on this?
Well, of course, we have good cooperation with the United States, with the European Union, and we are in touch with other countries as well. We are developing today a close relationship with our neighbors in the Middle East. I may say, for instance, that climate change is a prominent field of cooperation, for instance, between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, either if it's water or food security or agriculture, etc.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Moise, I want to ask you about the big picture. I mean, most of the technologies we've been talking about here are somehow after the disaster happened, hurricanes and rising waters and whatnot. What about the big thing? The big thing, the climate change as, you know, as the huge cloud behind or above all of this?
So I think big picture is that we all know the world has to reduce its emissions. Globally, we need to reach net zero. We need to have a balance between those emissions that we still emit to the atmosphere and those that are sequestered and taken up either by natural-based sinks, whether it would be ocean or land, and of course, engineered methods. And I think when we're talking here about technology, we have to know that today, with all the pledges of the world, we're not yet reducing the amount of emissions that we need to reduce. And according to different assessments and evaluations, we know that current technology, if deployed at scale, can perhaps fill the gap of what we call around 60% of the emission gap of how we have to reduce the emissions. And this is not just our response to the acute effects of an extreme weather event or adaptation, but simply reducing emissions. And that extra 30% is really a matter of where people are looking to technology, to new developments in all areas of energy, mobility, as we said, manufacturing, in order to break and bring down that emission gap. And in this, I'd like to say that when we globally, Israel, have the ambitious, very ambitious target of talking about net zero and thinking, obviously, also consumption patterns, but also technology, it is to a degree, at the moment, an improbable challenge. It's an unsolvable challenge. We believe it's solvable, but there are no solutions at the moment. And I think to connect this back to the defense industry, I think our defense industry here, we have the capabilities as far as the mindset and the skills. We have both technology-wise, both business-wise. And I think this is an industry which, to a degree, is solving unsolvables. You're solving solutions where the defense, those who are active are coming, we need a solution to X, and the defense industry as an industry has to come up with ideas that have not been there before. So I think in that way, the defense industry is also an excellent platform. But yes, we fully believe that technology needs to be accelerated, can be accelerated by Israel. We have fantastic companies here, and when we're talking about renewables, we have companies working in energy storage, in microgrids, and I believe that we can play a big role in advancing globally emission reductions, as well as adapting to acute
Gideon, do you see cooperation, or how is there cooperation between the private sector, like defense companies here, and the Israeli government and foreign ministry?
Of course, this is what we do. This is the bread and butter of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And the fact that we sit here and share our knowledge or insight is a demonstration for that. I really want to emphasize once more the key word, at least in what I was trying to, the message that I was trying to deliver in this session, which is opportunity. Okay, there are opportunities here, lots of opportunities, and one can create advantages here. The defense industry of the future will be an industry which is very minded to aspects of climate change and sustainability and the environment. And a company that will be able to show that they are producing military hardware or platforms, etc., without emissions, and also that this equipment is emissions-free, will have an advantage in the new world, because militaries bear a great responsibility, especially in industrialized countries or in modern countries, for emissions. So this is another advantage that can be used by the defense industry, and it is important.
Do you actively help Israeli companies to reach countries around the world?
Yes, actually, yes. So I started by saying that, elaborating on my position, which is new in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's important to know that in the Ministry of Defense, there is a department that deals with exports, defense exports, for decades already. But as Ministry of Foreign Affairs, till a few months ago, we didn't have this position concentrated within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and vis-a-vis our embassies all over the world. Why is it important? Because of the defense cooperation that we want to promote, rather than exports, which is, marketing and selling and getting money back. This is not the main issue. The main issue is cooperation in the fields of defense and security, iHLS. Maybe if I have a minute to say something about offensive cyber, referring to the morning panel, I'll be happy to do that. And so there is regulation over defense exports and cooperation in general, but there is also the need to seek for, as Gideon is saying, opportunities. And we are, in that sense, we are assisting directly the industries and the companies, and we want to put more emphasis on small and medium companies, because the big ones, it's important to know that 90% of the Israeli defense exports is made by 3 or 4 big companies. They are important, they invest in R&D, as I mentioned before, it's very important, but also small and medium companies are important. So our role, our goal actually is to seek for those opportunities and to help out those small and medium enterprises and companies after they have developed their products to be able to reach out all over the world.
I'll get back to the cyber issue. It's interesting, but I want to ask you, Tamar, about the cooperation. That's actually a major part of what you do, cooperation between the private sector.
So definitely a big part of what we do within the Israel Innovation Institute. I'm sorry, I'm not sure that I mentioned beforehand that PLANETech is a collaboration, a joint initiative. We're a non-profit between the Israel Innovation Institute and CBG, UK Business Group. So a lot of the work that we do within innovation is obviously through collaborative work. We have various models that we work with, but definitely we're seeing collaborations we need between the startups and corporates, startups and government as in to reduce barriers. Government has a big role to play, and they do play in giving initial funding to many of the Israel climate tech initiatives through the Israel Innovation Authority. So we work together in order to bring the partners. If a corporate needs to reach net zero, it usually will bring in ideas not from within its own heavily instituted organization, but will go towards open innovation, will go towards a startup. And these are some of the programs that we'll do. We'll work with corporations in order to have some sort of competition, in order to bring them Israeli startups so they can choose from that can answer a solution to one of their challenges. We collaborate within PLANETech, also with we had a big cooperation together with Soroka, one of the biggest hospitals here in Israel, and Clalit, the largest public health provider. Again, having a competition that we could bring to them startups that could offer them solutions for energy efficiency within their system. So by these sort of collaborations, we're providing a platform that some of these technologies can be embedded. Likewise, funding opportunities. At the moment, much of my friends here were talking about opportunities. So there are many financial opportunities now for climate technologies, both private and public. Money that is being invested is growing by the year. Just this year, $30 billion were invested in climate tech. That's double the amount last year. There are more and more dedicated climate VCs popping up really like mushrooms all over the place. In the States, around 140 dedicated climate VCs. So we collaborate by bringing these VCs into Israel, seeing the Israeli ecosystem and matching and helping each to answer the other's needs.
Okay, before we finish, Shai, let's go back to the issue of selling cyber technologies to other countries.
Yeah, I wanted to underline the fact that there is a very strict regulation in Israel as for defense exports in general and cyber exports in particular. The morning panel that dealt with the offensive cyber effects and implications was very interesting, but I think that there was missing the leg of the regulator or the state actually that regulates. It's important for me to note that there is a law in Israel from 2007 on defense and cyber exports. The regulation is made by the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also in the Ministry of Economy and Trade, as for dual-use softwares and so on. And it's important to take note of the fact that there is no possibility to export today from Israel anything that has to do with defense or security without getting two licenses. One is for marketing, and the other one is for exporting further on. And that is a very strict regulation. I think that today Israel is amongst the most strict countries in the world as for regulation in that sense. And it's important to note that because the issues of the companies that are now registered in the United States for the offensive cyber so-called software was exported, also those two were operating under regulation. It's not that there is a jungle here in that sense and everybody can do whatever they want.
We'll leave it at that because we're out of time. Thank you very much. Good luck to all of us with this climate change. We need it, right? Thank you very much, guys from the Foreign Ministry.